Most people think Saudi Arabia became powerful because of oil. They're only half right. Oil made Saudi Arabia rich. But wealth alone doesn't explain why nearly every major power, from Washington to Beijing, competes for influence in Riyadh. Today, Saudi Arabia isn't trying to build an empire through conquest. It's trying to become the country that shapes almost every major decision in the Middle East. On September 23, 1932, at Al Hamidiyya Palace in Mecca, Prince Faisal announced a royal decree on behalf of his father, King Abdulaziz ibn Saud, officially proclaiming the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia. This move merged the rival regions of Hijaz and Nejd into a single state, concluding 3 decades of military campaigns. But the new kingdom was poor, isolated, and lacked basic infrastructure. To secure his rule over fragmented tribes, Abdulaziz relied on a historical 1744 pact between the House of Saud and the Wahhabi religious movement. Under this agreement, the monarchy gained the political legitimacy needed to rule, while the clerics gained authority over law and education. This alliance stabilized the state, turning a divided peninsula into a centralized nation. Why does this 1932 consolidation matter? Without internal stability, the kingdom could never have projected power outward. Domestic legitimacy became the necessary platform for later regional reach. Yet, in its first years, the government remained broke, relying almost entirely on religious pilgrims visiting Mecca. The ruling family needed a massive economic engine to survive, and a group of foreign geologists was about to uncover it. On March 3, 1938, after years of dry holes, American drillers struck commercial oil at Dammam No. 7, a well they called the Prosperity Well. It flowed at 1,500 barrels a day. Within a decade, production grew to 500,000 barrels daily. The newly formed Arabian American Oil Company, or Aramco, became the engine of the state, securing full national ownership by 1980. This single resource transformed a cash-strapped kingdom into a financial giant holding some of the world's largest proven reserves. Why does this matter? Saudi Arabia discovered that regulating production yields more influence than simply selling crude. By choosing to hold vast spare capacity, Riyadh became the primary decision-maker in OPEC, and later OPEC+. Under contemporary energy minister Prince Abdulaziz bin Salman, Saudi Arabia uses strategic adjustments in its output of 10 million barrels a day to stabilize or shake global markets. A single production cut in Riyadh immediately raises pump prices in Europe and affects economic growth in Asia, turning oil output directly into geopolitical leverage. Every year, the Saudi monarch exercises a distinct form of global authority that requires no military force. As custodian of the 2 holy mosques, the king holds spiritual stewardship over Mecca and Medina. In 2025 alone, the kingdom hosted over 1.6 million international Hajj pilgrims and nearly 17 million Umrah visitors. By managing these massive annual gatherings and administering a strict visa quota system, Riyadh secures direct, recurring diplomatic access to over 170 nations. Why does this matter? This spiritual prestige provides a layer of geopolitical influence that oil wealth and military power alone can never replicate. Saudi Arabia's regional ambitions inevitably collide with the Islamic Republic of Iran, establishing the defining fault line of modern Middle Eastern geopolitics. This is not a story of direct military confrontation, but a quiet structural battle for regional hegemony. Contrasting Riyadh's Sunni monarchy with Tehran's Shia revolutionary model. Why does this proxy struggle matter? Instead of risking direct war, both states project power by funding local partners, turning Yemen, Syria, Lebanon, and Iraq into active arenas of competition. In Yemen, the Iran-backed Houthis directly threatened Saudi borders, while in Lebanon, Hezbollah secured Iranian influence on the Mediterranean. This indirect warfare allows both powers to bleed each other's resources without triggering a devastating face-to-face conflict. Yet, confrontation does not preclude negotiation. In March 2023, a Beijing-brokered deal restored formal diplomatic relations between Riyadh and Tehran. This normalization proved that intense strategic rivalry can coexist with tactical diplomacy. But even with open embassies, the underlying competition for the soul of the Middle East remains unresolved. On February 14, 1945, aboard the USS Quincy, King Abdulaziz and President Franklin D. Roosevelt forged a historic agreement. American security guarantees in exchange for reliable Saudi oil. For decades, this oil-for-security bargain anchored Gulf stability. But deep fractures eventually appeared, driven by disagreements over regional policy, human rights, and energy production. Why does this friction matter? Riyadh realized that depending on a single superpower was a major vulnerability. Instead of breaking with Washington, the kingdom began hedging its bets. In 2025, Saudi Arabia secured nearly $20 billion in Chinese Belt and Road investments, while simultaneously coordinating oil policy with Russia and expanding defense ties with India. This strategy of multi-alignment is a calculated shift, designed to give the kingdom maximum leverage in a multipolar world. In 2015, Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman began consolidating political decision-making in Riyadh, dismantling decades of consensus-based royal rule. His master plan, Vision 2030, aims to completely restructure the state by weaning it off oil. The kingdom is pouring billions into tourism, entertainment, high-tech manufacturing, and logistics to build a self-sustaining domestic economy. The ultimate symbol of this strategy is NEOM, a planned $500 billion futuristic city on the Red Sea. Why does this internal remake matter? Riyadh is making a massive geopolitical wager. Domestic economic overhaul is the only way to build permanent external power. But the risks are high, and the outcome is far from guaranteed. To fund this massive gamble, the kingdom had to turn its sovereign wealth into a global financial weapon. The Public Investment Fund serves as the primary instrument of this financial strategy. This massive sovereign wealth fund has quietly expanded Saudi influence into international finance, artificial intelligence, and global sports, securing the rights to host major events like Expo 2030 and the 2034 World Cup. Why does this global buying spree matter? It establishes a network of mutual dependence. When foreign governments and multinational corporations rely on Saudi capital to fund infrastructure, technology, and renewable energy, they acquire a direct stake in Riyadh's stability. These investments create economic ties, those ties build political incentives, and those incentives protect Saudi diplomatic interests, ensuring the kingdom's security is guaranteed by the self-interest of its partners. Riyadh operates in an environment where no single power can dictate terms. The kingdom competes and occasionally coordinates with Turkey, the United Arab Emirates, Qatar, and Israel. This is not a military confrontation, but a high-stakes race across aviation, logistics, trade routes, and technology. Saudi state carriers battle Gulf rivals for airspace, while sovereign funds bid against each other for international assets. Why does this commercial race matter? In a multipolar Middle East, influence belongs to whoever controls the network. Military force still acts as a shield, but economic connectivity serves as the primary weapon. By positioning itself as the central transit hub and financial gatekeeper between East and West, Riyadh ensures that no major regional decision can be made without its consent. Saudi Arabia's bid for hegemony faces structural limits. Despite diversification under Vision 2030, crude oil still generates up to 90% of government revenue. This leaves Riyadh vulnerable to a looming global energy transition. Domestically, a rapidly growing youth population demands millions of high-paying jobs and housing, pressures that state funds must constantly subsidize. Externally, regional instability regularly disrupts infrastructure plans, as active conflicts threaten trade routes and deter foreign capital. The kingdom's ultimate test is whether it can convert temporary oil leverage into permanent regional centrality, before these domestic and external pressures erode its financial shield. Riyadh's ultimate goal isn't conquest, but absolute indispensability. As the global energy landscape shifts, the kingdom is betting its survival on becoming an irreplaceable financial and diplomatic hub. The future of Middle Eastern power will be decided not by weapons, but by economic gravity. Subscribe for more geopolitical analysis.